Hi, I'm Mickey Rose from Pure Health Clinic. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for your lovely comments about my last couple of videos where we discussed the doctor's data GI 360 gut test. I'm glad they were really helpful for you. Today, we're going to turn our attention to hormone tests, and I'm going to take you through my favourite, which is the Dutch. So I hope you find it helpful. I've seen thousands of patients over the years as an actual health consultant, and now I've stopped clinic work for a bit. I want to pass on the really good, life-changing information I've learned to you. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe and the like video to help me keep this channel going, and hopefully other people can find what they need to. I'll pop anything I mention in the links below for you, and if you have any comments or questions, I'll reply to them below. So here we are with the Dutch test. I've got a sample report here of the Dutch with cycle mapping and CAR, which is cortisol awakening response, because that pretty much shows you everything you can possibly do with any kind of Dutch test. Dutch stands for dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. I always try and get that one right. And it's a dried urine test. It's quite a sort of new kid on the block, basically, but it's massively taken over from the normal standard salivary test, which is still very good. I still rate them, but the Dutch gives you a lot more information. So I'm going to try and take you through the test as I would sort of look at it as it came through as a clinic result. So I hope it makes sense for you. I'll put a sample report down below for you so you can print that off and go through it as you need to. Okay, so I hope it helps. So the first thing that you're faced with is this cycle mapping page, which all looks a bit confusing, but essentially with all of these sorts of tests, I'm quite a visual sort of person, so I tend to look at the graphs really, and they tend to give you the sort of easiest way of looking at things. You're given all of the sort of data here, which is how they've plotted everything on the graph, and you can check everything depending on whereabouts you are in your cycle or whatever. But remember that basically the visuals are usually the easiest, so don't sort of get thrown by all these different bits of data everywhere. They're very useful for clinicians if they want to see a very specific sort of marker and how that is, and you can also have a look to test to see how far you might be out if it's not very clear up here. But essentially what we're looking at, the first graph we've got here is to do with the estrogens, and it's not particularly brilliantly done, this graph, I always think, with all these great big blobs everywhere. But essentially you're looking at the black is the high normal range and the low normal range, so you sort of want to be within or around those sorts of two black lines really, and they're measuring estrone and estradiol. Estradiol is the most significant, that's E2. So really that's the one you're sort of looking at a grade on, that's the red line, but sometimes you might want to know what the two most significant ones are. There's E1, E2 and E3, and E1 and E2, which is what these are the most significant estrogens basically, which is why they're plotting them. So what you're essentially looking at here is, are you above or below or way out or slightly out or whatever from either of these black lines? So would that mean that your estrogen's too low or too high at various stages, or whatever? That gives you a clue about what's going on in your cycle to do with estrogen. So it might be, I don't know, you have menstrual migraines or PMS symptoms, and you're thinking, well, why the heck does it always happen around this sort of time of the cycle? And that can give you an idea, if you're looking at the estrogens and the progesterones below, to see what the balance is between them, and if anything's either in excess or needs boosting at some point. So I hope that makes some sense. The other thing that's really useful here is for fertility. So you want to see when this ovulatory peak is with the estrogen. So some people will peak over here and they're ovulating late, and that might help them in terms of sort of fertility issues, so they know exactly what's happening when. And so that's what that peak is for. It's usually somewhere between 10 and 15. But some people I've seen it much later, and so therefore they have to sort of concentrate their efforts for conceiving, if you like, over in this sort of area instead, or measuring when they're ovulating or whatever. So then moving down, similar sort of thing with the progesterone here. Your progesterone peaks a bit later, so your estrogen goes up first, and then your progesterone follows it and then pulls it back down again, and then you go into the bleed. So you can see in the progesterone here that the progesterone is not that brilliantly high. So the high normal for progesterone is up here, look, and the low normal, and some of the progesterone metabolites are quite low and some are right in the middle. So overall, that'd probably be on the lower side of normal. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So essentially, you're looking at, are the cycles peaking and following the line that they should do, really? Yeah, if that makes any sense. What I've done in the I've done a whole new hormone test results fact sheet for you. I tried once again to do a little crib sheet for you, and I think it's 32 pages now. So I'll put a link to that below for you, so that you can actually see what I mean. And I've put there what should happen at the different various stages of the cycle, so you can see what you're sort of aiming at, really. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so this is all the data here. So then this is a serum equivalent. Some doctors will only do this kind of thing in serum, even though it's pretty good in dried urine. It correlates pretty well. But just in case, the lab does this as a serum equivalent for you as well, so you can see. So this is the estrogen here. For this particular person, so you can see their estrogen is a little bit, it's okay, but it's a little bit low here, and then it drops a bit low there, and they're ovulating around about the right, or peaking at around about the right sort of time on that one. And then again, the progesterone here, you can see that the progesterone peak is quite, it's in the middle, so it's okay on that side of things. So it would look like this person's not that far out, actually, on that one. So that's a serum equivalent, just in case you need it as well. So it's a bit of extra data for you. Okay, and again, you've got the data here that shows you what the actual amounts were that were tested and how they've made the equivalents. So moving on, this is your, so most people don't do the cycle mapping. You would do the cycle mapping if you particularly were having problems throughout the month and you wanted to know what was happening with your hormones to cause it, or as I say, for fertility issues, that's quite useful. So for example, I did cycle mapping to find out why I was having migraines at certain times of the month, so it can be quite useful because then you know where to plug it. And in the hormone test results guide that I've given you chapter and verse for every marker on how you boost it or how you lower it. Obviously, you need to work with your practitioners on that. They've got your case. Hormones are very complicated, but I've given you that information, so at least you've got somewhere to start with and to start discussing that with your chosen health practitioners. It took some writing, that I can tell you, but hopefully it'll be useful for you. So most people don't do the cycle mapping, so this would be their first page on that one. So this is your sort of summary, really. So they have these, this tells you how to read the result, but essentially what you're looking at is if you're having periods still, or you're there's different reference ranges. This is the female report. There is a male report as well, and again I'll put a link to that below for you, so that you can see that. But essentially you're looking between the two stars is the reference range, so you should fall somewhere within that if you're cycling as a woman, and this is the menopausal range within this little purple block there. So it gives you an idea where you should be. So we go straight across here and we have a look at the summary. So remember I said E2 is the most important one, estradiol. So we can see here it's way above there, where the little star, the top star is, and so we can see that the arrow's gone red, and so you can see that you're out of range there, and that's high. Then we move over to progesterone, and again they've done a serum equivalent here. This is because progesterone isn't easily tested in dried urine. So what they do is they test the metabolites, so what you metabolize the progesterone down into, and then they add those up and total them, and they found that that correlates very well with actual serum progesterone. So this isn't progesterone in dried urine. This is a serum equivalent amount, which is pretty reliable, I've found. And you can see here with this one, it's right in the middle of the reference range, and so that seems okay. And then we move over to testosterone here, and we can see that it's actually on the lower side here. So because it's below the lowest normal reference range here. Okay, so this gives you, obviously you've got a lot more information about these down further into the test, but that's basically the pattern that you're looking at there. So you're looking at high estrogen, progesterone's okay, testosterone's low. Okay, so moving over onto here, this is where we start looking at the cortisol, the adrenals really. So you've got the usual pattern that you're looking at here, and what we would normally do is we're looking to see, are you, so this is the high range limit, this is the low range limit, are you within that limit, in which case that's okay, are you below it, or are you higher than it? Okay, so you can see where during the day the cortisol might be too high or too low. That's really important because actually you can then target your boosting or lowering strategies, which are all in the adrenal plan, which again I'll put a link down below for you. So I've given you, so say you, I don't know, this person here, they're dipping down a little bit there. It's not major, but say it was much further down. We'd want to be raising the cortisol at that particular point. Say they were up high in the afternoon or something, we might want to be lowering it, so it's out of balance. So all of that is in the adrenal plan with all the protocols I've used in clinic for the last 20 odd years. Okay, the difference with this one is it includes CAR. CAR is cortisol awakening response. Again, I've talked about this and all the markers in the hormone test guide, so don't worry about remembering everything. But essentially, CAR is, I suppose it's a measure of how well your adrenals respond to a stressor. So sometimes the pattern will look fine, everything looks fine on the surface, but you can tell from the CAR, which is basically taken from waking for the first 30 minutes sample and then 60 minutes, and there should be a specific sort of rise. And if you're not making enough cortisol, you can tell that actually your adrenals are developing a problem. So it might not show further on, it might look perfectly normal, but we can see that actually your adrenals aren't rising to the challenge, if you like, of the cortisol awakening need. So the report gives you a paragraph down here normally, and it will tell you whether you're within the expected range. So this one was 3.21 and the expected range is between 1.5 and 4. So that's okay. They also give a percentage range, so you can see that it should be between 50 and 160%. So this person is at 315% here on that high awakening, and then it drops down. Okay, so you can see that the cortisol awakening response is okay, higher than normal, in fact, if anything. Okay, but then it explains a lot more about that down further below in the report. The report gives you loads of information. Actually, it's very worth reading. It's a bit technical, but they also do have lots and lots of videos where you can that you can watch, and you can see that they're putting them here. Look, so there are lots of videos you can actually have a look at if you're not sure about any particular aspect of it. But hopefully this video will help for you as well. This is how I would read it anyway. Of course, don't forget your practitioner may well be looking at this differently. This is how I've learned to do it over the years. So I can only give you that input. So moving over onto here, we're now looking at DHEA. DHEA is one of the cortisol markers. We tend to measure cortisol and DHEA in adrenal test. Incidentally, the CAR samples are salivary, and then the rest is taken from the normal dried urine. Not just because it's easier to find it in saliva on that one. So DHEA we can see here, we can see the reference ranges, so you can look up your age. I think this lady's in her 30s. Let's have a look. Yeah, 34. So we're looking for it to be between 1,300 and 3,000. So you can see she's just out of that, 3,480. So she's a little bit high on the DHEA marker on that one. And the way they've got to that is they've basically added up the DHEA sulfate and the metabolites there to make sure that they've got an overall picture of what the DHEA production might look like. So it's a little bit on the high side. DHEA is made out of cortisol, as are all the steroid hormones, and it acts as a precursor for making your steroid hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and especially testosterone in men. So that's why it's important to look at that. They call it the vitality hormone. It drops as we age, which is not very nice to know, is it? But basically, it can drop once you're over about 40. Well, I think it peaks at 20 or something, and it will drop over time, and I do see it dropping an awful lot with people. In the US, they give DHEA as a kind of HRT hormone, if you like, and we don't tend to do that. And I've put the boosting protocol in the adrenal plan for you, and also I've given you some ideas in the new hormone test results fact sheet as well, that I'll pop in the shop for you once I've finished it. Okay, so that's DHEA. This one here, we're looking at the free cortisol. Here, free cortisol is what's measured normally in salivary tests. Very important because it's what's bioavailable and what you can actually use in the body. But it only represents about 2% of the cortisol that's actually produced. So it can be a little bit misleading in some places. I mean, I've done salivary cortisol tests for a long time. Absolutely fine. That's what the adrenal plan's based on, in fact, before the Dutch came out, and I've never really had an issue with it. But we do also measure in the Dutch the metabolized cortisol, which can be quite useful. So sometimes people have a salivary cortisol test done and they think, well, that shows that I've got too much cortisol, and yet I'm absolutely knackered. So that doesn't seem to fit what's going on. And that might be where I say, okay, well, let's do a Dutch and have a look at the metabolized cortisol and see what the production is actually like and what are you doing with that cortisol. That's what the metabolized cortisol shows you. It shows you an idea of how much you're producing. So about 80% of cortisol is in the metabolized measurement here, and very little is in the free, although the free is the bit that you really need to be right. But so the metabolized cortisol will show you how much you're actually producing, but it also shows you how much you're metabolizing down. So for example, you'll see later somebody, there might be one here, look, we're making enough metabolized cortisol here, look, it's okay, it's well within the sort of 2 stars, we're okay, and yet the free cortisol is actually really quite low. So is this showing that actually we're metabolizing the cortisol down too much? We're making we might be making it into inactive cortisone or something like that. So I'll see that in a bit and have a look. But essentially, this person's making enough cortisol, but they're not ending up with a lot of free bioavailable cortisol. And what you want to know is, well, why is that? Okay, you might want to boost this in some way, or you might want to stop metabolizing it down too much, stop clearing it out of the body too much. And again, this is the summary page, so all of this detail is based on all the information that you get further on. So this is where you start to get all the this is all the hormone data, which is how they've made those summaries on that one, and you can come back to those individually as you need to. But again, I like the graphs. So you can see what's going on in here. So this is where we get a bit more complicated. This is the hormones again, and how are we metabolizing them? So essentially, let's start with progesterone here. So progesterone, remember I said they took the 2 metabolites of progesterone and then worked out from there what the overall progesterone is. It's sort of average between these 2. So you can see you break progesterone down into 2 different metabolites. One of those is right on the border of low, and the other is pretty high. So between them, that's why we've ended up with, look, an average sort of thing here. So overall, and sometimes it can tell you a difference, and I think the report gives you an idea. If you're making more of this type of one, the alpha, rather than the beta, there can be reasons for that. I think it's very calming from memory, actually. If people are making it, putting their progesterone down, that it's actually quite a calming thing. So it may be that it's the body trying to calm stress down or something like that. But have a look in the report below, because it'll show you a bit more about that. So moving over to here, this is the DHEA sulfate that we were talking about, which is on the higher end of normal, perfectly good amount there. But we're not making much testosterone out of it. So, and that might be, and you think, okay, well, I've got plenty of DHEA, which is the precursor for testosterone. Why am I not making a lot out of it? And you see this little dotted line here, it says aromatase. What happens is that some people, well, or we all, metabolize testosterone down the aromatase with the aromatase enzyme into E2, which is, if you remember, this is the most significant estrogen. So you can see this person is probably metabolizing far too much of their testosterone down into E2 because that's high. So we've ended up with low testosterone. So in that case, we need to inhibit that process. So we want what are called aromatase inhibitors, and I've talked about specifically how you do that and what those are in the hormone test results guide for you. But that's just a little idea of what's happening. Then you break down the testosterone into two other metabolites, and this is quite important for men and women, because what you want is you want a balance between these two on that side of things, and we also want to know, so this is going down what's called the 5-alpha route, and that's going down the 5-beta route. So we've got quite a lot of testosterone going through the 5-alpha level, and you can see this gauge here shows you. Now 5-alpha, basically you convert testosterone into DHT through this process, and DHT is 3 times more potent than testosterone. So you don't really want something which is a very strong, potent testosterone, which is what you're going to get from 5-alpha activity here, because that might lead to things like polycystic ovary syndrome, or I don't know whether it leads to it, but it's certainly it comes up within it. It's more androgenic, so you're going to get things like weight gain, hair loss, acne, PCOS, but you've also got the risks of having high testosterone in men, where you might have, say, prostate enlargement or risk of prostate cancer, that kind of thing. So you basically don't want this 5-alpha reductase to be coming over this side. Basically, you want a nice balanced level. You want some, because you need some potency, obviously, but you don't want it to be too much. In this case, it's too much. And again, in that hormone fact sheet, I've given you an idea of the types of things that will inhibit the 5-alpha reductase activity for you. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's really complicated. Hormones always are, and the Dutch is a really complicated test. But you're hopefully starting to see why it's a really important test, and you can see a heck of a lot of what's going on. So this person, basically, we know has got a high 5-alpha reductase activity, so we'd want to do something about that to bring that down. Okay, moving over to the estrogens now. There are 3 main estrogens. Remember I said E1, E2 and E3. So basically we're looking at the levels here. E1 seems to be okay, E2, the most significant, is too high, and E3 is too low. On that one, but essentially we're looking, that's the most important one, and we're looking across the board. So if you remember that summary page at the top, and we could see that what the estrogen was in total. So that's how they take those. But the even more important thing is how you're metabolizing these estrogens. So essentially there are 3 pathways really that you metabolize estrogens out of the system. So basically you want to use your estrogen, and then you want to get it out of the system. You don't want a load of excess estrogen hanging about, because then you get estrogen dominant sorts of problems. There's a fact sheet in the A to Z on the Pure Health Clinic site about that. And you get a higher risk of estrogenic cancers and other conditions, basically. So you don't want that. So you want to be metabolizing this quite well. This pie chart, if you like, over here, this graph over here, shows you what you're doing. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to metabolize it mostly down the 2-OH pathway, okay? Because that's the 2-OH is the safest form of estrogen metabolite to have in your system. 4-OH you don't want, because basically it's procarcinogenic. So it has the potential to damage DNA. So you don't want a lot. So you wouldn't want that to be over here, right in the red. And if you did, you want to do something about that. 16-OH is more potent than 2-OH. So again, it gives you a much stronger type of estrogen. So you basically want it to be going down the 2-OH pathway. So in this case, we can see she's fine. So the green expected percentage, usually about 70% for 2-OH, or 60 to 80 it says here, and she's at 83%. So actually, this person is metabolizing this this excess E2, the most significant one. So even though it's high, she's actually dealing with it quite well because it's going down the 2-OH pathway. Does that make sense? And again, you can look at the other two to see whether she's within that. So she's 11, so just about on the 4-OH, and she's way low on the 16. So actually, that's quite healthy. Then what happens is you want to methylate this 2-OH down. So that's what this little bit is all about here. So you use different enzymatic pathways, Compton methylation, basically, activity. And essentially, what you usually find, if this is normal, is that whatever this figure is, it should be about half here, okay? So that's how they work out whether it's sort of too high or too low. On this circumstance, she's methylating this down really, really well. In fact, it's a little bit high, which you can see on the gauge here. But say that was low, obviously that then gives you not only an idea about what she's doing with that particular estrogen metabolite, but what she's doing in terms of methylation within the body. So it's a good clue to whether your methylation processes in your body are keeping pace or not, or are too high. If they're too low, you really want to pick that methylation up, because it has major implications in the body and not just about hormones. Again, there's a fact sheet on methylation on the Pure Health website, and I've also talked about it in the hormone fact sheet for you. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So you're talking all here is all about the sort of metabolites, really, of what you're doing with the hormones. All right, so let's move on. This is all the information about the adrenals that they've worked out. Again, here's a nice graphical bit for you. This shows you here your melatonin, which comes up later. So this person's okay on that one. DHEA production is a bit too high here when you add everything up together, which we saw on the summary page. And again, we can see the metabolized cortisol here is okay. So the new bit here is whether this person is actually making more cortisol. So again, a bit like the hormones, you have to metabolize that cortisol down, if you remember I said. So this person had quite low free cortisol, but okay metabolized cortisol here. So you think to yourself, well, what is that person doing with it? They've clearly got enough over here, so where did it go for it not to be bioavailable? Well, in this case, this person is converting it to more cortisone. Cortisol is the active metabolite, cortisone is the inactive metabolite, so it doesn't do anything. So this person had plenty, but is then flinging it down the cortisone pathway, which is making it inactive. So therefore, they don't have a lot to play with that's left. So what you'd want to do is think, well, why is this person likely to be making more cortisone metabolites, and do something about it? And I've talked about that for you, and the specific things that you do in either case in the hormone results guide for you. So it's just a sort of representation pictorially of what's going on there. And you've got a bit more information here if you wanted it about what the actual patterns are with cortisone during the day and what the cortisol is. So you can see that this person's dropping sort of in the morning, but then picking up by afternoon. So it may be that actually what we need to do with this person is make sure that not only we pick the cortisol up, so she's making more, she wants more bioavailable, we want to specifically boost it in the morning within the first hour of getting up. And mid-morning probably, so that we can pick it up and get it a bit more into this range here. So you can see, look, cortisone is fine, look, making plenty. So we want less cortisol and more less cortisone and more cortisol. And specifically at this stage of the day is where you would take your boosters or whatever it is you're going to do. And the adrenal plan will take you through how you do that. It's far too complicated to explain it in a little fact sheet. So the adrenal plan is there for you with specific protocols on boosting cortisol or boosting DHEA or lowering cortisol or whatever it is that you need to do. So hopefully that helps for you. And again, just talking about the cortisol here, you can see this is where they get this the gauge thing from. This is the saliva cortisol, which is far too low, and the cortisone, which is high. Okay, this gives you some more information about it as well. All right, so this is the last bit. This is the last page of the Dutch test, and this was added a couple of years ago. Really useful, actually. These are basically some really useful organic acid markers to give you some overall general information about your health. So the first one is MMA, which is a B12 marker. So if this is high, generally speaking, somebody needs more B12. And then you've got B6 markers. Again, if it's high end of range, the person might need more B6. The next one is really important, glutathione. So if this is high or low, the person might need more glutathione. And again, in the in the hormone test guide, I've explained what to do about all of these and given you specific products and that kind of stuff for you to start thinking about and talking about with your practitioners. So that's those. And then we've got 3 neurotransmitter metabolites here. We've got a dopamine metabolite. So again, if this is low or high, the dopamine is likely to be. This is the noradrenaline and adrenaline. In America, they call it norepinephrine and epinephrine. That's what that's there for. And again, if it's above or this one's above, so that person's probably got too much adrenaline or noradrenaline. And what do you do about that? Or they might not have enough, which is more common. So usually, if they're feeling a bit flat or something. Where are we? So that's those 2, and then we've got melatonin, which is. I'm just thinking. Actually, I think there's another one in there that's not showing on the range, but there may well be another one. But I have covered it in the hormone guide anyway, so don't worry about that. Can't for the life remember what it is now. I know, 5-1-HAA or something like that, which is a serotonin marker. So they must have added that in since they've done this particular one. Again, similarly, if it's above or low, it usually corresponds with what your serotonin levels are. So you would do something to boost or lower your serotonin levels. Okay, next one is melatonin. Now melatonin is what you're producing from light. Obviously it helps, it's what wakes you up and helps you go to sleep, so it has a major impact in terms of sleep quality. In the US they would give melatonin again as like a sort of form of HRT, if you like. We don't tend to do that, but you can get melatonin in this country now. You couldn't a decade or so ago, and again I've given you ideas of how to get hold of that. If you should need to, working with your practitioner. And then the last one is an oxidative stress DNA damage. I'm not even going to pronounce that. Basically, it's 8-OHDG. and that, if that's high, you really need to sort that out. Interestingly, I often find it when the glutathione is too low, as well. Glutathione is a major antioxidant that you would make sure that you've got enough of if this was high. But with this particular person, it's within range, so you don't need to worry about it. So some really useful information there. Do you need some extra B12 or B6? What's going on with your antioxidants, your neurotransmitters, your melatonin, and have we got oxidative stress going on? Okay. So that's that. This is a really complicated representation of what exactly all those pathways are doing. Really useful and interesting, and it does give you lots of ideas about how you boost cortisol or whatever. But it's a bit scary to look at. So hopefully my fact sheet that I've done for you will be a bit less scary than that. And then the rest of it is really useful in terms of going through the lab analysis, and they will pick out different bits and pieces. So make sure you read all this, because it does give you lots of information and will definitely help. So you can see it goes on for ages, and it'll give you a lot of information you can then work with and basically summarize your report. So that's all there is to it. That's the Dutch test. So I hope you found that overview of it useful. As I say, it's quite complicated, but essentially you're looking at what are your adrenals up to, what are your hormones up to, how are you metabolizing those down, how safe are you, in terms of cancer risk and estrogen or testosterone and metabolites that you don't want hanging about. And then you've got all these markers that give you a good idea of how your body's working in those particular areas. So a very useful test. And obviously you've got the cycle plan in there as well if you want to actually look at what's going on throughout the whole month. So it does cover. I wish it included thyroid, because that would be a total hormone test then for me to give you, but it's measured in completely different ways, so you can't. So basically add a thyroid onto this and you've basically measured the whole of your system. So as I say, I've put lots and lots of information and specific products and protocol ideas, what each marker means, into the hormone test guide for you. So get that, and I hope that really helps you to work out what might be going on in your particular condition. Okay, so that's the Dutch test for you. I hope you found that really useful. I know it's quite complicated, but then hormones are, but hopefully that video, the videos from Dutch themselves, and the hormone test results guide that I've done will really help you analyse your own results. If you've got any questions or comments, just pop those below for me and I'll answer them there, or I'll do a Q&A video at some point if that might be useful for you. I'll pop links below as well to anything that I've mentioned as we've gone along, including the fact sheet, where you can purchase the Dutch tests from, and anything else I think that might be useful for you. If you thought this was really helpful, please subscribe to the channel and like the video and share it. It just helps me keep this channel going so that more people can find the help that hopefully they will need to help themselves get well. Okay, so hope you enjoyed that and I didn't blind you too much for science, and I'll catch you on the next video.